Natural lands can get crowded and even ruined by an expanding civilization. But vast and off-the-grid places still exist, allowing us to experience nature in our own way. Hart Mountain National Antelope Refuge is one of those special places. The Wildlife Refuge protects habitat for pronghorn and a diverse group of animals. It also allows for adventures and seeing what this land was like before we arrived. Hart Mountain sits in southeastern Oregon, which is made up of wild land and open landscapes. Hundreds of square miles have been protected so the land stays as it always was. The Wildlife Refuge has many points of interest, including wildlife viewing, petroglyphs, and a hot spring. The Wildlife Refuge and mountain were named after a heart-shaped brand used by pioneer ranchers. The wide mountain is a fault block, which is the result of the Earth's crust fracturing, causing this block of land to rise up. Just outside the Wildlife Refuge is another point of interest, and that is where our adventure starts. Northwest of Hart Mountain is a desolate-looking area that most wouldn't bother stopping at. While it doesn't look like much, it is a hot spot for a special gemstone called the Oregon Sunstone. Millions of years ago, an eruption that layered the area in lava was covered by a lake. The lava flow was underwater for thousands of years and eventually dried up. Once exposed, the weather broke down the lava to reveal the sunstones that we see today. A couple sunstone mines operate here where you can pay to use equipment or buy sunstones. There is also a free public collection area. Small sunstones can easily be found, with the occasional large one too. The supply seems to be endless. Rain and wind uncover more sunstones each day. Oregon Sunstone is a special variety of sunstone and is our state's gemstone. They can be tumbled and cut in many ways to make all kinds of decorative stones. Copper inclusions in the Oregon Sunstone called schiller give it a distinct peach shimmer. Looking east from the Sunstone area, you can see the entirety of Hart Mountain. This place is far from civilization in any direction. Enough gas, food, and other essentials must be brought in to ensure a safe trip there and back. At the western foot of the mountain is Warner Wetlands. The area is covered in dry lake beds, with some full of water depending on the time of year. In the spring and fall, wetlands are used by thousands of birds during their annual migrations. Some birds stick around at Hart Lake, which does not dry up each year. Across Hart Lake is the town of Plush, which is the closest place for some supplies at 1 or 2 hours away. Approaching from the west, the road follows the base of the mountain before zigzagging up a canyon into Hart Mountain. As the mountain gets closer, it changes from blue to showing its real colors. It also becomes apparent how large the fault block really is. The road passes the west slopes of Hart Mountain, which are pretty wild and untouched. As you get partway up the mountain, there are a few good viewpoints of the west and Warner wetlands. Another overlook has a view to the east. Steens Mountain can be seen, which is an even larger fault block mountain. A central location is the visitor center for the entire refuge. Equipment and residences for workers of the refuge are all in this spot. Helpful info can be found inside, along with the only potable water source for the area. Gas is probably the most important thing to keep an eye on when going further into Hart Mountain. The drives are long, and knowing how far you are from refueling at all times is important. Getting a campsite should be first priority, as they can fill up. Of the few Hart Mountain campgrounds, the hot springs are by far the most popular. The campground sits along a creek with some first-come, first-served campsites. Rock Creek provides much-needed water to an overall dry area. Trees like these aspens surround the creek and provide for a lot of life. With water, plants, and shade, there is a perfect habitat for a lot of insects. Just like a wildlife refuge should be, it was a diverse assortment of species. Some were common, and some were more unusual versions of the ones we are used to. An abundance of insects means lots of food for other animals. A pair of killdeer could always be found chirping around these white rocks. While they could fly, they were also great runners. Unusual minerals cause this white rocky area in the campground. Those unusual minerals come from the hot springs that the campground is named for. One hot spring is an established and walled-in pool. The other pool is more primitive and shallow, with a nice view of the surrounding area. The 100-degree water in these pools is said to be healing water, helping our skin as well as stress and pain relief. Flowing up from tiny cracks are bubbles, which indicate that the water is geothermally heated by reaching magma far underground. While it's easy to get a part of Hart Mountain to yourself, the hot spring campsites definitely fill up. Having a backup plan for other campsites is necessary. There were a few objectives to this adventure, but wildlife is always an important part of visiting a refuge. One good way to see wildlife here is simply driving the gravel roads and looking at the vast open landscapes. We were looking for the pronghorn that the wildlife refuge is named after. There is a huge diversity of species in a protected area like this, so many other animals of interest can be seen too. Big open sagebrush fields are usually the place to find pronghorn. Sometimes they can take a bit to find, but this group was right in the road. Millions of pronghorn once roamed North America. Hart Mountain was set aside as a protected zone so that this species doesn't just disappear. This band was mostly female, which don't have the distinct forked black horns that males do. Instead, they have little stubbed horns. The females tend to stick together, and this band had a cute group of fawns. After seeing one band of females, we continued our search in hopes to see more. Even without wildlife, the landscapes of Hart Mountain are an impressive view. While it's called an antelope refuge, they are actually pronghorn, which look somewhat similar, but aren't even part of the same family. These animals are the last remaining members of the Antelope family. You might think they are related to deer or elk, but the closest relative is actually a giraffe. The males have larger forked horns, which are different from antlers. The horns are actually bone, which are covered by the black sheath that they shed each year. The male pronghorn also have black fur on their cheek to distinguish them from females. This band of males seemed cautious but confident. The confidence could come from their speed, as they could get away from just about anything. This is the fastest land animal in the country, known to sprint up to 60 miles an hour. Just as impressive as their speed is their endurance, as they can migrate hundreds of miles. These bands migrate between Hart Mountain and Sheldon Wildlife Refuge in Nevada. Pronghorns are the stars of Hart Mountain, but there are other sights to see. Behind the animals is the highest point of the wildlife refuge, Warner Peak. The peak sits at 8,000 feet and can be hiked up. At the top is a radio tower and a good view of the surrounding high desert. The last part of Hart Mountain I wanted to share are the petroglyphs scattered all over the refuge. One place known to have a lot is the descriptively named Petroglyph Lake. A 1.5-mile hike through the sagebrush desert leads to a dry lake bed. The lake is a little hard to see as it has been dry for a very long time. The rocks around the rim have petroglyphs created thousands of years ago. It is hard to say what exactly each artist meant with each petroglyph. Some symbols have a common meaning, but a lot of it is up to our interpretation. Petroglyphs were commonly a means of expression and communication used by Native Americans. Each one could be meant to communicate with other people or have a more spiritual meaning. The horned lizard was usually a symbol for strength or life. Circles are often used to represent migration and life cycles of both animals and tribes. The upside-down man could be a lake diver, or it could be one of those people that leaves me really weird comments on the internet. We're lucky to have areas like this protected. The ancient artwork of Petroglyph Lake is a special sight. While we covered a lot at Hart Mountain, we only showed a fraction of the land and wildlife that are present. We scanned many cliffs for bighorn sheep and looked for sage grouse, but you can't see it all in one trip. We are fortunate that people decided to protect this land and not allow this habitat to disappear. We all benefit in many ways when places like this are kept wild.